Så er det igen blevet tid til at byde velkommen til Papstinenser, din podcast om brætspil. Din studievært er Christian Bak Petersen.
Velkommen til Papstinenser, en podcast om moderne bræt- og kortspil, præsenteret i samarbejde med papskubber.dk, hvor du kan finde nyheder, anmeldelser, artikler og anbefalinger til, hvad dit næste brætspil skal være. Mit navn er Christian Bak Petersen, og i dag der skal jeg bare præsentere det første i en række episoder, der udspringer af Papstinensers besøg på Spielmessen 19 i Essen. En tur, der er blevet til i samarbejde med Bastard Café og rejseselskabsudvidelsen Bastard Tours, og der skal lyde et kæmpe stort tak herfra. Denne episode byder på et helt dugfrisk interview, som jeg foretog for et par dage siden med spildesigner og Spiel's vinder Elizabeth Hargraves, der på ganske kort tid har fået kæmpe succes med sit første spil. Det er naturligvis Wingspan, vi snakker om, og som har været en af de titler, som folk virkelig har stået i kø efter for at få fat på her på Essen. Særligt den der udvidelse, der lige er kommet. Vi fik snakket Wingspan, vi fik snakket udvidelser, både den, der lige er kommet, og hvad der ellers er på vej. Vi fik snakket designproces, vi fik snakket noget om kvindelige brætspilsdesignere, og så fik Papstinenser også lige lov til at komme med et indspark til en mulig europæisk version af Elizabeth Hargraves kommende spil. God fornøjelse med det. But Elizabeth, thank you for taking your time. You seem like on Essen here quite busy. So how has Essen or Spiel been for you so far?
It's been fun. It has been busy. I was at the Madigo booth all morning signing games in English, and then I moved over to Feuerland for all the people with their German games. So it's fun to meet everyone and to see the Spiel.
Yeah. Because is it your first time here?
It's my first time here, yeah.
Okay. It's my first time here as well. It's rather daunting stepping in through the door. Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, have you been to Gen Con and stuff?
Yeah, so it's a similar feel to Gen Con, but there are little differences, and I do think it's more space here. I think it's bigger.
Yeah. Okay. But it must have been a crazy year for you as a board game designer.
The whole year, yeah. I mean, starting in January, just with sales taking off way more than anyone expected, and it's just kept going. It's wild.
We've been doing a lot of talks with Danes and other people who's gone there to pitch their game to a lot of companies and stuff. Can you tell me a bit about how did the whole Wingspan getting published? How did that happen?
Sure. So I started working on it in about 2014, and I was working and playtesting and iterating for about 2 years before I pitched it. And then I took it to Gen Con, actually, and met with a bunch of publishers there. And that's where I met Jamie and Alan from Stonemaier Games, and they ended up signing it a few months later after we had some back and forth.
So you have been through with the whole sell sheet and prototypes.
Right, yep, absolutely.
Okay. But did you manage that in the first go? You brought it to Gen Con, and then it went a couple of months, and then it was...
Yeah, so Gen Con, Jamie and Alan were interested in it, but had some feedback for me, and so I sort of said, take this feedback, do what you will with it, and send us a copy when you're done. So a few months later, I sent them a new version, and they said, great, let's keep working on it, and we'll send you a contract now. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah.
And your board gaming background, is it going way back, or is it recent, or how?
I mean, sort of modern hobby board games. I probably started playing in about 2005, but before that, lots of Scrabble and Spades and lots of casual games.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And when did you decide to? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and try designing a game.
It was really 2014, I think. And it was, after I'd been into the hobby for 10 years or so, and really started talking with friends about what, we enjoy playing all of these games, but none of the themes or anything that we're interested in, castles and trains and, and so, what would it look like to have a game that was about something we were actually interested in? And I think it was my husband who was like, we need Race for the Galaxy, but with bird cards. And so that was sort of the genesis of the idea, and I started playing around with that.
Race for the Galaxy with birds.
Yeah.
Okay, I can understand why Stegmaier and Co. They bought into that. How long has birds been a part of your hobby and your life?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I always sort of owned a pair of binoculars and was interested in nature generally, but really started getting more serious about birds maybe 2006, 2008, somewhere in there. Then I started paying more attention and trying to learn the bird names and the songs and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reception you have had, because I thought like instantly when I played it first time in Europe or in Denmark, then everyone's like, oh man, we need this, but with Danish birds. How long did it take before the first, could you do this with European birds instead?
I mean, Jamie asked me to start working on an expansion before we released the game. And Europe seemed like an obvious choice because people in Europe were, interested in the game, but wondering, it's such a market for board games, and wondering why not there were so few birds that they recognized in the base game. I think even from some of the blind playtesters that Stonemaier has in Europe, we got I don't recognize any of these birds.
Oh no, they got amazing names, but I got no idea. If she says that this one eats this and that, I'll believe it, right. But I have never heard of it before.
A lot of them, though, even if it's not the exact species that's in Europe, they're in there are similar birds in the same family.
Yeah,
so it's
true. Can you tell me a bit about the design process, because it's obviously been underway for a few years. So,
yeah.
How do you work as a board game designer?
I mean, it started, from scratch, just writing in pencil on paper on little handmade cards. But once I sort of had an idea that it was working, just testing with some friends, pretty quickly it ended up in a spreadsheet.
All good things must come to a spreadsheet.
So right now I'm working on the next expansion, and I have not printed a card yet. It's all just in Excel, working through what I want the powers to be that I first test, and then soon I will start playtesting. So I'll print out a deck of cards. I go straight from Excel into this program called Nandeck that can translate a whole spreadsheet, and it'll make all of your cards for you at once, which is amazing and such a time saver, and I did not know about that when I started. So I'll print a deck of cards, and then in the Washington, D.C. area, because it's a well-populated area, we have the luxury of having a lot of people who are happy to playtest and a lot of other game designers. So I'm part of several different groups that meet monthly, or I have a couple of friends that I meet with once a week, actually, which is a huge help, because really the way that you see the changes that need to be made, you only see it if you're playing the game. So it becomes a very iterative process where you make some changes, you play again, you make some more changes, and eventually it's where you want it to be, and people are having fun and don't have any comments for you, and then you're done.
The way we've been talking to a few designers, and some of them are very focused on one game, and others. We got a Danish designer down here, and we talked to him this morning, and he says he had 13 different games he was pitching, during Essen here. Are you one game at a time, or have you got a lot of ideas floating around?
I'm somewhere in between, more one game at a time. Especially if I'm really deep into it, it's very hard for me to pull out of that thought process of brainstorming all of the powers for the wingspan cards and what the birds should be and all of that. It's I get very immersed in that, and it would take extra energy for me to then switch to something else. But if I reach a point where I'm working on Wingspan and I'm done with what I can do for now, and I've sent it off to Jamie to take a look at it, or it's out for blind playtesting or something, then I might switch over to something else. So I'm working on multiple things, but in blocks, in big chunks. So I have another game coming out next year that I was working on during some of the downtime from Wingspan. So I sort of bounce back and forth.
Okay. You lift a little bit of the lid about what is that game?
Yeah, so it's a game about monarch butterfly migration. I think that's public.
Look how happy boys now.
Which is another thing that's like specific to the Americas, right? But
again, it opens up for European versions.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't. Are there migratory butterflies in Europe? I don't know.
I don't know.
It's a really fascinating phenomenon. So these tiny butterflies,
sails right there.
Right?
Yeah.
These tiny butterflies, they migrate like 2,000 miles. It's amazing.
We got eels.
Oh yeah, the eels.
They migrate like all the way to the Saragossa Sea from Denmark.
Yeah.
To spawn, and then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
That's a long journey. Maybe butterflies is like a more. The graphics gonna be pretty.
I don't know. I like eels. Eels are cool. It's different. You need more different games.
Yeah. You mentioned different games, and I got this one, which you have also done.
Tassimasi.
And I'm a bit curious, when in the whole design process did this very tight, there's like, 20 cards? 24? 18 cards. And with that.
Right, so Button Shy that published Tassimasi is a company that specializes only in 18-card games. They have dozens of them now. And they, during Gen Con of 2018, sponsored a contest and said, send us your 18-card games, we'll pick one. And that's they have a little thing people call Gen Can't for people that don't go to Gen Con. So it was a Gen Can't contest for people. Anyway, so they announced it like a month before Gen Con, and I started working on it then, and it was due a month later. So Tassimasi was basically designed in a month. It was only 18 cards. It was purely inspired just by this contest and by the timing in relationship to having just finished a deck of 170 cards. I was like, 18 sounds really lovely. That sounds great. And also inspired actually by the fact that another contest had just finished or had just announced their finalists, and it was like 100 entrants and 20 finalists or something, and none of them were women. And I was like, more women need to be entering these contests. So I threw my hat in the ring.
Okay.
We have a Danish contest.
Yeah, we have a Danish contest.
I think now would be a good time to mention the Danish contest.
Yes. We have a Danish convention called Festival.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Which do like a competition for role-playing games or scenarios and for board games. And within the last year, they have about 75. Oh, they have over 100 people who apply to pitch for the contest, and then they pick out shortlist 20.
Yeah.
And they get made, and then they get played and previewed and judged somehow. And within the last year, there were no women on between the 22 they picked, and very few had even applied. So they tried to. We're doing a thing to promote or make sure that female designers. And I dropped by your homepage and saw that you had this long list. Because, can you tell me, what is it you're tired of being called or announced as? Oh,
right. So especially earlier this year, I haven't heard it so much lately, but like people would say I'm one of the only female game designers. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not true. So I started collecting this list, and it got much larger than even I expected, even knowing like I'm not the only woman out there. So it's like 200 people now that are just have a published board game.
Yeah, or
and there are
involved.
More right.
It's also like graphics and stuff, but.
No, that list is all people as a designer. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Because you're tired of being the only.
Right.
But what do you think? Because the festival people, they have been trying to do, let's do something actively to promote this, to make sure that there will be more women, that this won't be like an all boys fest. Because in the role playing society in Denmark, this is switched a lot. Because in the 90s it was like all guys, and today I think it's about like 60-40 maybe. So that has happened a lot. So they feel like they get left behind. But what do you think you can do to make sure that there are more limelight on?
I mean, for things like contests, I do think part of it is really just encouraging women to apply. I think that there is research that shows that women are less likely to put themselves out there at a certain level of being done with something. Men are more likely to think, oh, that's done enough to enter the contest, and women are less likely and more like, oh no, it has to be perfect before I would ever send it to anybody. So I do think just like putting it out there that you explicitly want women to enter and are okay with things that aren't 100% finished probably helps a lot. And then, reaching out to specific people too that you know about and that are involved in the community of women designers and getting the word out. Can't hurt.
No. I think they did this year, but both
I saw it several times, yeah.
And I think this year the head judge of the board game is a woman, and the head judge of the role-playing thing is a woman.
But it sounds like an easy thing to do, just like telling women that men are actually only submitting stuff that are 60% done.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's admit it, but I mean, it's not that outspoken, right? We submit it and look like it's perfect, but we know it isn't.
It shows quickly. Scratch the surface.
It doesn't get shortlisted.
Yeah. And I think something that some other contests have been doing lately that I think has been successful is emphasizing that you'll get feedback from the judges on your entry. So that I think it helps some people switch their mindset that they're not entering the contest because they expect to win it, but they're entering because they might get useful feedback from people who've played their game, and that might just make it easier for people to get over the hurdle to say, oh, sure, I can.
It's just part of the process.
I'm just getting feedback. It's not so scary.
So, can you tell me a bit about the expansion and the expansion you're working on?
Yeah.
For Wingspan. Not
Tassimasi, I don't know.
The 19th card. I have a little extra.
Actually, there's a solo version of Tassimasi, which technically is an expansion. Yeah. I think it's 6 more cards or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, for Wingspan, the first expansion is European Birds. It's 81 new cards. It's got some new bonus cards as well for your personal secret bonus goals, as well as some new goal tiles for new end of round goals. And partly the idea was just, like we were talking about before, wanting to cover the European birds and get birds in there that European gamers might recognize. And part of it, as I was coming up with the powers, I wanted to do a set of powers that were completely new. So there are cards that have end of round powers. So instead of activating them every time you do your habitat, they only activate at the end of each round. So if you get it out early, you might use it 4 times, but later in the game, it's less. But because it only activates a few times, I could put more powerful things on those birds. So those are kind of fun. And some of them do things that let you kind of mess with what's going to happen with the end of round goals, because you can get out a whole bunch of eggs or, things like that. Jamie had already asked me to start working on the expansion before we released Wingspan. Because there's such a lead time. I really did have many months after my time was done on the base game before it came out. And so as I was working on the expansion, reviews were starting to come out, and I was really trying to take to heart some of the feedback that people had about It didn't happen that much in my playtest, that people were always laying eggs during the last few turns of the game, for example, but I know that came out a lot. And other little things like that. So trying to think about, like, okay, what's behind the fact that everyone lays eggs at the end of the game? There's obvious reasons, but there's some more subtle stuff too. So like trying to come up with more ways for birds to create points in one turn, because at the end of the game, I think that's one of the key things about the eggs, is it's something you can do if you only have one turn left. So some things like that, and some of the other little nitpicks that people had with the games. I tried to come up with powers on the birds that might relate to those, or change things up some. So hopefully people will enjoy it and feel like it mixes some things up, and without radically changing how anything plays or adding like major new complexity.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It was very nice meeting you.
Yeah,
and,
likewise.
Hearing
I'm glad it worked out.
Stort tak til Elisabeth for at finde tid til Papstinenser i sit stammespilprogram. Og med det er vi nået til slutningen af denne episode af Papstinenser. Der kommer flere Essen-snak den kommende tid, men vi prøver selvfølgelig at mixe det op med mere klassiske Papstinenser-episoder også. Igen, stort tak til Bastard Café for at støtte op om det her Papstinenser Essen-eventyr. Du kan også støtte Papstinenser over på tier.dk. Der kan man smide en skilling per episode, hvis man har lyst. Hver en krone bliver brugt til at forbedre den podcast og sprede budskabet om vores fantastiske hobby, og ikke en krone af tierpengene er gået til at købe fadøl eller sauerkraut i Tyskland. Du kan finde Papstinenser på iTunes, Spotify, Podimo eller hvor du ellers henter dine podcast, og vi bliver super glade for stjerner og ratings alle stederne. Denne episode er skabt i studie 629 på Motel One i Essen og er produceret af Bo Jørgensen. Mit navn er Christian Bak-Petersen, og på vegne af Papstinenser ønsker jeg god luft under papvingerne.